All right. Welcome to the Gentleman Badass podcast. My name is Josh Kidney. With me, as always, Mick Doyle. And today we have a very special guest. We've got Scott Thompson. Now, Scott is actually both Mick's coach and my coach. And the what we like to say is the man who brought Jiu Jitsu to the Midwest. Basically, there was no Jiu Jitsu in, I don't know how many states until Scott started doing that. So, Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Yep, you bet. Glad to be here.
So let's just start a little bit. We like to start with the backgrounds, your background. So tell us a little bit what you were like as a kid, kind of how you got into martial arts, and then maybe evolve into how you ended up finding jiu-jitsu.
All right, yeah, that all kind of blends together. As far as growing up, probably the biggest thing that had an effect on my life is my dad being a cop. So I'm an old guy, was born in 1963, and my parents had me.
So old.
Yeah. My parents had me when they were 17, so we all grew up together. My dad was an Omaha homicide detective and in the cruiser in the first part of his career, and that had a big effect on my life. I've been with him, I think, 6 times when we pulled guns on guys. He trained to be a cop. It was like 5'10", 218 pounds, could bench 480. Yeah. So it was kind of like walking around with the cavalry all the time. And I liked that feeling. I think that had a lot to do with once I got out of high school on my own, I was like, he's not around as much. Maybe
I better become my own badass.
Yeah. But a number of things happened. In 1970, 2 policemen were blown up, Omaha police officers, and that bomb was meant for my dad. And the night of Larry Menard's funeral, the police officer that got blown up, and it was racial tensions, Black Panther thing. And I'm doing a lot of this off memory, so if you research the actual story, it might be off a little bit, but I'm telling you what I lived through. So I'm 7 years old. My parents are going to his funeral that night. My grandparents are over. Phone rings. I answer it. Is this Officer Thompson's house? My mom takes the phone away from me. I go to sit on the couch. She screams, grabs me, runs out of the house. It was a bomb threat at our house the night of his funeral.
Wow.
So we leave the house, and the bomb squad's there and has like our car doors off, laying in the driveway, and we couldn't even be around my dad for months because they were afraid we might take a stray bullet meant for him.
Damn.
Yeah. So it was kind of crazy times, and I mean things like going to the drag races when I was a kid. Bunch of Hell's Angels were up in the bleachers. My dad's pointing down, saying, "Yeah, I put him in the pen for 4 years, and this and that." And all of a sudden, they're pointing at us. There's like 40 of them, and us, my family.
Wow.
So of course, my dad goes down in the middle of them, and we're watching, and I see him shove a few of them. And he comes back up and he says, "We need to leave." But he said, not before he had my mom go out to the car and get his gun. Because he said, this might get a little crazy. So again, I'm maybe 10, 12 at the oldest, and she goes out, gets the gun, it's in her purse. He has his arm around her, in the purse, on the gun, and we're heading out to the car with 40 Hells Angels following us, yelling, cussing.
And you're like, what, 10 at this
Yeah.
stage?
So
Crucible of fire early on, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, so the adrenaline's flowing,
Yeah.
But at the same time, my dad's yelling and cussing back at them. And I remember being, seeing that kind of stuff and being scared, but still like, yeah, I like this feeling. I like this feeling of, it's a bad situation, but I got the right guy on my side. So that kind of, once I got out of high school, that kind of led to me Was never a big weightlifter. I messed around with my dad a little bit, but I mainly wanted to learn how to fight, how to protect myself. So in about early 80s, 81, maybe even 1980, there wasn't a lot of martial arts schools in Omaha then. Mm-hmm. So there was about 4 for me to go look at, and a couple of them were kooks. And I ended up with Mr. Kim, who, was a legitimate guy back then, always was, and started taking Taekwondo at that time.
Okay. How old were you then at this point?
Probably 18 or 19.
18 or 19. Okay.
Yeah.
And so from there, how long did you train Taekwondo? And then how did that transition? How did you end up finding Jiu Jitsu?
Okay. Well, I started training, got my first degree black belt in Taekwondo, maybe 84, and won every tournament I ever went to, fought in tournaments, and things were different back then. There was no protective gear, and it was a little crazier, but still point tournaments, we had to spar within the rules. So my dad had a big effect, but I couldn't mention martial arts and my history of combative arts without my cousin RJ. He was college wrestler, high school wrestler, only I think 3rd in state was the best he ever did, but he definitely peaked in college. He wrestled for UNO. Coach Mike Denny, who's a 5th degree black belt in judo. Coach Denny is. He's probably higher than that now. That was quite a while ago. But RJ was definitely a badass. I think Mick could vouch for that. Most guys could vouch for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think every now and again you have a guy that just comes through your gym and you're just scared shitless of what this guy can do if he stays training, and he was he'd be way up on my list of guys that were like I'm sure you'll explain more, but he passed away way too soon, but he probably would have been the Daniel Cormier of today.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's a stretch. Anyone that ever wrestled with him, anyone that certainly ever trained jiu-jitsu with him, he's just a natural, and probably had he have lived, he would have been an absolute wrecking force in the UFC.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have to mention him because that's kind of how my whole grappling world started. He was actually back then you could be a 5-time All-American. He wrestled for UNO Division II, and he was a 4-time All-American there, but he qualified for Division I for that tournament. So he was actually a 1-time Division I All-American. So he was a 5-time All-American, and then his senior year at college won a national championship, Division II national championship, and I think won his first, or he might have got too deep in the bracket and got hurt, which he never been hurt his whole career, but who knows, he could have won the Division I national championship too. But he's the reason we got in with the Gracies. And kind of the background on that story is, it would have been the late 80s. I was kickboxing. Do you remember the old Sprite night or fight night at Peony Park? Yeah. Was kickboxing with some guys and doing well with that. So he came over to my house to learn how to kick and punch. And he won the national championship in 1988. This would have been about 89, 90. So I'm working on stuff, and he keeps looking at me, and he's like, I don't know if I'd try that stuff in a real fight. And I was like, what? Look at all these trophies and medals. So he was like, well, let's go a little bit. And every time I moved, single leg, double leg, suplex. So that night went from me teaching him stand-up to him teaching me grappling.
Okay.
So I started training with the UNO wrestlers and Coach Denny in judo. And RJ had been out to the Olympic Training Center and sparred with the Schultz brothers. who were multiple gold medalists. They were smaller than him. He won the national championship at 190, but walked around
240.
Yeah, 240 probably. Matter of fact, I always tell the story. People are like, man, I want to lose 2 pounds this month. His record for weight cutting was 25 pounds in 24 hours.
Jeez.
Yeah. They don't let him do that anymore because guys died doing that.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah. But, so we're grappling and stuff. And at the same time, I'm training with the guy in Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee style, Paul Vunak. Mm-hmm. And we used to do crazy stuff. We'd put motorcycle helmets on and just beat the hell out of each other. And he sends out his quarterly newsletter one time and said, I'm selling my house and moving to LA. I just sparred with these Brazilian brothers, and they just beat the hell out of me. So I called him up. I read it, and I called him up. I said, is this real? You know, what's the story here? And this would have been early 93. So I'd been doing judo and a little Niwaza up until that point, just getting killed by the UNO wrestlers. I get pretty much tapped from any position at that time. And so I'm talking to him, and he's explaining it to me, and I'm really not getting it. And you know, even today there's a lot of kooks in martial arts, but back then there was a lot.
Still think there is a lot. Yeah. They were just in our same zip code back then.
Yeah.
A little bit harder to hide nowadays.
Yeah.
UFC, sure, but still.
Yeah, with UFC and social media and stuff. So I'm still trying to figure out what Paul's talking about, and he gives me some phone numbers. Rickson Gracie, Royce Gracie, Renzo Gracie, and Jean-Jacques Machado. So I called all the Gracies, and I kind of laughed because every one of them said, you know, and Rickson had been here a while, but Renzo and Royce were like just got off the boat. They were pretty hard to understand and didn't speak a lot of English, and they're working jobs and teaching in their garage to try and make money and let people know what they're doing. But all three of them said, you need to come train with me. I'm the second greatest jiu-jitsu fighter in the world. And again, I'm just trying to figure it out and talking to Paul. And then I called Jean-Jacques Machado, and he said the same thing. He's like, man, come down to Dallas, train with me. I'm the second greatest jiu-jitsu fighter in the world. And I kind of laughed and talked to him, and I was like, you know, I told him the whole story. I said, it seems like the only argument is who's second toughest guy in Brazil in jiu-jitsu. And he goes, yeah, because everybody knows my cousin Rickson is the toughest. And I said, well, what's his phone number? So he gives me his phone number. And I called and leave a message. And it's probably 2 weeks later, 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings. My wife answers it. And I wake up, and she said, there's some guy on the phone for you, can barely speak English. So I get on the phone, it's Rickson. You know, it kind of gets my heart rate up a little bit because I'm like, you know, if this is the real deal, I'm talking to the man right now.
Yeah.
So we talk a little bit, and, you know, my experience at that time was getting killed by wrestlers on the ground. So I asked him, how have you done against really good wrestlers? Now, RJ told me about training with the Schultz brothers, who again were smaller than him at the Olympic Training Center. And his quote was, they ripped my arms off and stuck them up my ass. So I already know, I mean, I roll with RJ at that time almost every day. So if these guys are killing RJ, they are bad dudes. So I asked Rickson, and how do you do against good wrestlers? And he says, well, have you ever heard of the Schultz brothers? I was like, yeah, I've heard of the Schultz brothers. He said, well, yeah, I roll with them at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. So in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, does he have no arms also, like RJ? So now I'm starting to get things in perspective. But Rickson goes on and on, you know, like most of the Brazilians do. Oh, man, great guys. They're so tough. And I'm like, yeah, I know wrestlers are pretty tough. And so in my mind, I'm still saying, like, how long did you last with them, you know? And he was like, oh, man, they're super tough. He said, it took me like 90 seconds, 2 minutes to tap him. So that did not reinforce my idea that this guy might be a kook,
Yeah.
you know, because I'm thinking, that I don't think that'll happen, you know. So I'm like, you tapped the Schultz brothers, and you know, the gold medal wrestling Olympic training center, Schultz brothers. He was like, yeah, but they're really tough guys. So anyway, I tell RJ this story, and RJ's pissed. And I asked Rickson how we could train with him. Well, he had a seminar coming up in Chicago, like in a few months. So I tell RJ this story, and RJ's like, that's it? We're going to Chicago? Because I'm going to kick this guy's ass. So the Chicago seminar comes, which actually, I believe it was around November. It was right before the first UFC.
Okay.
And we head to Chicago, and all the way there, we drove there that time, and all the way there, RJ's just talking about, you know, this SOB, talking this shit about the Schultz brothers. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to drop like $3,000 in the next 4 days. If RJ kicks this guy's ass, I could have stayed at home.
Yeah.
Saved all this money and time.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get there and meet him. You know, and RJ, you can tell RJ's a wrestler. And, you know, again, this is before the first UFC, and there's still 100 guys there from around the world. Matter of fact, when it first started, some guy from France, I had no idea what his deal was, but he was mad as hell. He comes in screaming and yelling in French, and threw his bag down and ranted and raved again in French. No idea what he was saying, but then he stormed off. And I was like, well, that was a long trip, long flight to come here and rant and rave and walk out. So anyway, he being Rickson, sees RJ, could tell he's a big, strong guy, wrestler, and so he calls him out to show moves on RJ. There's 100 guys there, and Rickson's like, who can get out of my headlock? The big man, RJ, you know, he didn't know his name, and he called him out, and RJ runs out, you know, like, let's go. Rickson gets him in a headlock, and again, Rickson's 190, you know, solid as a rock in 93. And gets RJ in a headlock. I'm sure that's what the first move was, because Rickson had used him and another great big guy all day, the first day of the seminar. And I'll never forget, he gets him in the headlock and says, okay, get out. Well, RJ can't even move. So Rickson lets him go, and RJ looks around in the crowd, finds me, looks at me, and just mouths, oh, fuck. So I kind of laugh. And still, they're working on moves together, and then it comes time to spar. And Rickson said, you know, I'll spar everybody. And still, even then, RJ jumps up and says, I want to be first, because when I kick his ass, I don't want him to say he was tired. Well, somebody beat RJ to Rickson, and so Rickson went with him, was the second guy to go with him. And, you know, RJ's there to kill him. And Rickson toyed with him, tapped him. And then Rickson went through everybody else. And again, I'm a stand-up fighter that's just been getting beat up by wrestlers. Matter of fact, on YouTube, there's a video of Rickson and I rolling at that seminar from 1993. If you search Rickson Chicago Seminar 93, there's like 4 different video clips, and I'm like 30 seconds of one of them. Yeah. Yeah. I always use it for to help my students know that they have hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when they watch me in 93 rolling with Rickson, they're like, oh my God, I have to look better than Scott did right now. But so Rickson's done with rolling with everybody, and he seeks out RJ and pulls RJ over. And the first thing he says is, do you have a job? And RJ's like, oh yeah, I got a job. And Rickson says, why? He said, man, you should be a fighter. And so Rickson and him rolled for, I bet, 2 hours. So I mean, I appreciate the accolades very much about the guy that brought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the Midwest, but without RJ, I just would have been another dork there. That, you know, I mean, I was hooked on it. I was hooked on it immediately, because I liked it. Brought back flashes of my dad, flashes of RJ. You know, where he didn't care who you were. I mean, there was huge monster guys. There was guys with old worn out black belts. You know, there was judo guys, wrestlers, and he was just next. You know, and some guys were like me, there to figure it out and learn. Some guys were there like RJ to kill him. And so that's when it all began.
Okay.
Right there. And RJ was our in. Again, without RJ, yeah.
So he was the gateway, like he was the guy that was good enough to not necessarily compete, but to be interesting to Rickson, and then okay,
and to be like extremely athletically gifted, but at the same time be willing to be a student and be fascinated by Rickson's aura, his technique, and I mean, RJ was certainly a competitive guy, but he really wasn't an asshole.
No.
You know, training sessions with him were like, there was no fucking around. Like, you were training hard and kind of no mercy, which is probably where the reputation of you and every kind of got magnified is because it's like, well, he's with that big dude right there. You know. But yeah, he was something special, man. Something special. So how long after Chicago then did you guys bring, well, hang on, so did you both got your blue belts at the same time?
Yeah, that's another great story.
And so you went out to LA for that?
That was in Chicago.
Okay.
Do you remember Dino?
Yeah.
He, who did he train? Arlovsky?
Yeah.
The UFC heavyweight?
Yeah, Arlovsky,
Yeah, so that was at Dino's school, and I think Dino got his blue belt that same weekend RJ and I did. Yeah.
So then you, after this first seminar in Chicago, you stayed in touch, and then wherever Rickson was about.
Yeah, and we went out to LA a lot, and then we followed him all over the country, trained with him whenever we could. And at that first seminar, it was about 50-50. About half the guys left hating him, wanted to go home to learn how to beat him. And the other half was like us, that were like, we're all in.
And so then, after this Chicago seminar, how many years before you guys brought him to Omaha?
That was just like 9 months later.
Okay, and that was the first time you saw or trained with Rickson, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I mean, Scott and I have known each other for a long time. And I think I may have even alluded to this in one of the other interviews, but all of a sudden, this guy starts acting like a crack addict. He's like, man, you got to see this stuff, this jiu-jitsu. And I was like, all right, calm down, dude. Yeah. You know, and then a lot of the people that I knew, like Paul Vunak, for instance, were all like, everybody all of a sudden is talking about the Gracies. And like, these are other martial artists who were always pushing the limits, you know. I mean,
Chuck Norris.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, like, even before knife fighting kind of became cool, Paul Vunak was doing some great stuff with knives. Paul was training, he was training the SEALs even back then. So like, all of a sudden, all these top guys in the martial arts community are all talking about the same family. And so, you know, and my buddy here comes back like a crackhead going, dude, check this out. You know, and so when he finally says like, hey, we're bringing Rickson to Omaha, I was like, you know, and it, you know, my intrigue with jiu-jitsu was already peaked. But then it was kind of down the rabbit hole after that. You know, it was such a kind of a groundbreaking experience for even me to, you know, and through the course of my fighting career, I've had access to a lot of very cool people and met, great martial artist, but there was certainly a different aura about Rickson, and like the myth and the legend and all the stuff that you hear about him, like you can't not spend a couple of minutes with the guy and realize that you're in the presence of someone who's just on another level. Just even intellectually about his family's legacy and what he does, and you just knew right away, like, man, this dude is like he's got this X factor about him.
Yeah, that's true. And that even as a beginner, it almost made it tough training with him because he's on such another level. I mean, he's a great instructor. Excuse me, but he would show things that were just beyond my, at that time in the early mid 90s, beyond my comprehension at that time. Now, when I train with him and see him, he has to put on shades from the glare of the light bulb above my head because it's all starting to click. 25 years into it, I'm like, now I know what he means. But 4 years into it, I was like, man, I know he's trying to tell me something, but I'm not getting it.
Well, one of the coolest things about the Omaha seminar for me is this was the first seminar that I'd ever attended from any martial artist who was willing to put it all on the line with every single person in the seminar. So he would spar everybody. And if you were a raw beginner, like Scott said, that had no experience, he toyed with you, talked to you. Like, it wasn't like an ass whooping. However, there were people that wanted to have a go. And he gave it to him, but the whole time his demeanor never changed. It was like he was playing with a beginner. And some of the people that came at him hard that day, he would do his own running commentary. If my friend here knew how to fight.
It's like twisting the knife when it's in.
Yeah, really. So you said the story of your blue belt was pretty interesting, getting your blue belt. Tell us that.
Yeah, and Greg James, a big training partner of mine, he was there also. He got his blue belt a little later after us. And the same thing kind of happened with him. But when you're around Rickson, you want to look like the man. So at that time, Rickson actually had a test that you had to go through. A physical test. You had to do certain things, be able to do certain things. So, of course, my partner is my 250-pound, 5-time All-American, national champ, college wrestling cousin. So, part of the test was, well, Scott, you have to get out of the mount. RJ, mount him. Scott, get out. RJ, don't let him. Now, like 15 minutes into this, I'm thinking, okay, Rickson, it's a little experience difference, a little size difference, strength difference. And Rickson just sits there, and I'm like, how long is this going to go? I mean, I'm dead. Anyway, the test lasted like 4 hours. And a few times I'm in RJ's ear, like, come on, dude. Back off a little bit. And RJ's like, fuck you.
Help me out.
He's like, yeah, I'm not backing off anybody in front of this dude.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great. This is going to be a long freaking day. And it was.
Yeah, I've been there. I mean, that was something that you kind of experienced, or at least I experienced in jiu-jitsu, was, I think you call it going to your dark places, where you are so tired and all you want to do is quit, but you can't. And you have to keep going, and you don't know when it's going to stop. And I think that prepares me for like life in ways that I've never ever felt before, because I remember doing one drill where you had us we couldn't be flat on our back. We had to keep going, and every 60 seconds is with a new guy. And me, my unathletic self versus
former
self.
Yeah.
Versus a room full of fighters, and going against a new one every minute. And I remember it's like one of my most shameful periods in the gym. Like Eric Daigle, tough guy was on top of me, and I'm like, I'm gonna puke. And he looks at you, and you're like, keep going. And he kept going, and I didn't puke, but I've been ashamed of that day ever since. So
Yeah, well, keep doing jiu-jitsu because there's another one around the corner somehow. I mean, it never really stops.
So you get your blue belt. When did you end up instructing? I know the rules were a little bit different back then when it came to teaching. How did that end up happening for you?
Well, actually, I started teaching at Mix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Once I got my blue belt, I was teaching at Mix, and some things happened there. And so I think I opened my first, and things happened there. Mick and I've always considered Mick one of my good friends, but the gentleman we were in with at that time had some issues, so everybody kind of did their own thing for a while. Not due to any conflict between us, but everybody's conflict with this one gentleman. But I opened my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school in 96, I believe. It's 96, 97, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And yeah, there was a lot of crickets chirping. I'm sitting there, and mainly it's me, RJ, and Greg rolling.
Yeah.
And although one time I get a phone call because it's in Plattsmouth. I'm living in Plattsmouth in a little acreage outside of Plattsmouth with my kids, Victoria and Nate, and my wonderful, very understanding wife, Kim. And so I get a call from these guys, and they're like, who the hell are you to be teaching jiu-jitsu? Me and my brothers and buddies been training in our basement for 4 months, and we're going to come up there and kick your ass. And I was like, we're here, man.
Doors open.
Yep. So they come storming in that night, and there's 6 of them, one great big guy. I mean, he was like 6'8", 290, huge guy. Who you could tell he was used to having everybody be afraid of him.
Yeah.
We never guessed RJ was not afraid of him. And RJ tortured him all night. We all tortured him all night. It's me, Greg, and RJ. And they ended up apologizing, signed up, paid dues. They ended up being great students.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That happened a lot, though, didn't it, Mick?
Yeah. You know, back then, though, it was different. Like, definitely, you know, the UFC was just starting. Definitely hadn't gained the momentum. It was still kind of very cultish. You know, you had to know about it to be watching it and be interested. But it was promoting the whole no holds barred.
Yeah.
Like, tough guys, here's your chance. And a lot of guys didn't necessarily need the venue of the UFC to take their chance. They were showing up at martial arts schools.
Yeah.
Just having a go. And I think, you know, my old gym in Benson, when I first started out, I mean, I had, to this day, it's still the best group of fighters that I've ever produced. And some of their ability was born out of that. We were constantly getting people coming in the door going, hey, I want to fight the toughest guy here. And we're like, okay, well, here's how it works. You know, you sign up for training. Nope, I want to fight them right now. Okay, well, here's what you do. You sign this piece of paper. And I'm like, great, sparring partners.
Yeah.
It's cannon fodder night here.
Yeah.
And that went on. I mean, it probably wasn't the coolest thing in the world to do, but everybody was doing it. And I think what the Gracies were doing is making it okay to defend your turf.
Yeah.
And that, like, it was almost encouraged, like, to defend your art and be willing to put it out there to test it. And it, you know, if you didn't have access to the big national tournaments and UFCs and stuff like that, open the door, let the tough guys in and see how they do. And it didn't go very well for all of them. And even our own training back then, I think, was far more brutal. Because I don't think even the Gracies had figured it out yet. Like, what is the formula to bring this to the masses? Because if we'd have just trained the way we used to, Jiu-Jitsu would still be a very isolated niche. It wouldn't be available for everybody, even though I'm sure that's what Helio wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It was still tribal. It was still about your turf, your patch, protecting the honor of your lineage.
And you had to be a tough guy.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't a family thing. It wasn't like the family would come and sign up.
And I think it's much better now, and I'm kind of glad that a lot of that challenging protect your turf element has kind of gone.
Yeah.
Because that's what it needed in order to make it much more of a crossover martial art and make it appeal to the masses. So it's as we've all grown, the sport has grown, the art has grown and kind of evolved. We were just talking last week when we were training that, like, doing what Rickson did back then, sparring everybody after a seminar, it would be highly unlikely that anyone would be willing to do that today, because everybody has been exposed to jiu-jitsu now. You watch YouTube, you watch The Ultimate Fighter. Like, jiu-jitsu is a word that everybody knows. Back then, if you said, I do jiu-jitsu, well, what's that? Well, you kind of, you wrestle with guys. Oh, no, that's it. No, I'm not interested. Wrestle with guys and that's gay.
Yeah.
And that was it. But now, like, jiu-jitsu gets the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, and people are knowledgeable. I mean, they watch the UFC.
Yeah.
I have new students walk in and they're like, now, can I transition to omoplata out of a bad triangle? And I'm like, I mean, those were not even words people said. It took a month to explain how to pronounce omoplata.
Yeah.
And you figure even now, like, a good wrestler with a little bit of jiu-jitsu can make you miserable on the mat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, he might not submit you, but he's going to make you work.
Yeah.
Even just the guy who's had like 3-4 years of high school wrestling that knows a couple of chokes, even if they're not quite right, he can still give you a hard time. I mean,
just because of those attributes, explosiveness, balance, base, all of those are great attributes to bring to jiu-jitsu. Okay. There's some downside stuff to wrestling too that kind of hurts you in jiu-jitsu, but it's all fixable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wrestlers tend to give up their neck a little bit, but as soon as they figure that out, then they're pain, especially if they're a really good college wrestler. So I guess if you don't mind me asking, what then happened to RJ?
It was crazy, fast. I tell everybody jiu-jitsu's like life. Enjoy the good times because they don't last forever. So when you're mounted, take advantage of it because, you might end up losing that exact fight to a rear naked choke. And, thinking about RJ, that's what happened. We rolled in 2007. He was 42 years old, had 4 or 5-year-old son, Mason, who just graduated from high school. We rolled Saturday. Sunday he called me, said he didn't feel good. Monday he called, said he went in, had his appendix out. They called him Tuesday and said, your blood looks messed up. You need to come back in. So it was Tuesday night he got diagnosed with leukemia. And every day I'm at the hospital seeing him. Wednesday I go see him. He's got his head shaved, he's ready to start chemo. Wednesday night his brain hemorrhages because his blood was so messed up, and he literally was purple. He was like a giant bruise. So they do brain surgery all night Wednesday into Thursday. His brother Patrick's comes up from Dallas. His mom's in town. Thursday was not very good news because they said his brain did not fare very well, and he's probably not going to be the same person that he was. And I remember thinking, man, RJ could not be less of a man, and physically, and be okay with that. And so Friday comes. Friday morning I'm driving to the hospital to call his brother and asked how he made it through the night, and he said he didn't. His brain had hemorrhaged again, and he passed away Friday night. So it went from Saturday rolling to a stomachache to leukemia to death in less than a week at 42 years old. And, you know, a picture of health. I mean, a high-level athlete.
Yeah, you know, so when I first started coming to the gym, it was just a couple months after. I had been in the band for a long time, and got a Facebook message from someone that a woman I'd met at a show the year before, and she's like, "I am so sorry about Nate." Nate was the former drummer of our band. And I'm like, "What's going on?" So I called our old singer, and he's like, "Yeah, Nate was killed in a motorcycle accident, 22 years old." And honestly, that point was when I decided, hey, I had already started working out at the gym, but I decided that from that point on, like, things can happen so fast. There's 22 years old, 42-year-old peak athlete. Like, I just knew I couldn't keep living a life I was miserable at, especially knowing that was a possibility.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, you don't want to make stupid decisions. It took me a couple more years before I quit my job and did all that. But yeah, it's an important lesson to learn that it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. It's just a matter of, it could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a couple years. You never know. So
Yeah, I think it's important that people spend their time on this planet doing stuff that they enjoy. And that's one thing, you know, the times I've always been around him, or it was always like he just loved doing what he was doing. You know, he loved being the poster boy for kind of Rickson here in the area, both you and him. And he was a beast, friendly one. You know,
he was a good guy, and he was a great guy to have on his side. I mean, I always think of one story. We're training with a guy, Greg James, knew at Offutt, and this guy was an amazing athlete. He works for the FBI now. Dan Gray.
Yeah, I remember Dan used to teach his stuff at the old gym.
Yeah.
On Maple, yeah.
Yeah, for the very first time. So Greg and I are going down learning Taekwondo. I mean, that was his main thing that he did. The whole Wing Chun, sticky hands. He had a wooden dummy in his basement. He was the fastest human being I've ever seen in person.
Huh.
And so it turns into, we're going to study that, and he wants to come learn Jiu Jitsu from us. And again, this kind of sums up, like you had mentioned earlier, how we used to roll and how things have changed a little bit. I mean, you and I still roll hard, but it was different back then.
yeah.
And he just happened to be a black guy. I mean, you know, that doesn't mean anything, but him and Greg are supposed to be RJ and I up at the wrestling room to roll. Well, Greg couldn't make it, so we just roll with him. And I remember him saying, well, you know, him being Dan Gray, I don't think you guys could take me down. You know, everybody's proven that theory wrong hundreds of times. I just smiled and said, okay. So we just roll normally. And he leaves, we go do our own thing. I get a call from Greg James laughing. I'm like, he's like, what'd you guys do to Dan? I'm like, do to him? What do you mean? He said he called me up and said that Scott and RJ hate black people. They try to kill me. And Greg said, no, that's how they roll with everybody. It doesn't matter what color you are.
So my neck injuries actually started with RJ.
Yep.
So we're rolling one night. This is when I first blew my neck out the first time. And RJ stands up in my guard. Now, first of all, the guy's thick as hell. Like, just trying to even close your guard on this dude, his lats, like his chest. He's just a monster. Well, he stands up in my guard. I open my guard and I go to grab his heels, because somehow I thought that would be great. I'm gonna sweep him. Like, the kid was like a skyscraper, man. You just couldn't knock him over. So I grab his heels and I like hike it, and I'm like, I'm gonna get him down. And he starts to topple, and I'm like, oh my God, I might actually pull this off. Well, then, instead of going backwards, he overcorrects and goes forward and stacks me. So my legs splayed apart, come over my head. My toes touch the ground behind my neck, and I hear my neck make this squishy noise that I've never heard before. It wasn't like a pop. It was like this squish, and it was loud enough that while his hands are on the ground and I'm still stacked, he looks down at me. He's like, "What was that?" And I was like, "I think that was my neck." So he lets go. I kind of bring my feet down, and I was like, "Oh man, I feel dizzy." And I'm like, "I feel like I'm gonna get sick." And he's like, "Okay, well, just go sit there." And I just like off to the side, and then all these motherfuckers are all rolling. And I'm sitting there like, I know something's wrong. Like, I've never felt like this before. I feel sick, getting a headache. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, did he break my neck? Or like, I mean, you know, and so everybody, yeah, great job. Everybody, see you tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, okay, guys, yeah. And I drive home. I can't turn my head. And I'm like, man, something's wrong. So I get up the next day. My left arm is like basically like someone slept on it all night. I go to the doctor, and he does a couple of like these feelings tests on my fingers, and he's like, we need to get you an MRI. And I find out that I'd herniated 2 discs in my neck. Just from, he's just so big. Like, it wasn't even like it was a violent thing, and it you know, it wasn't malicious. He was just so strong that when he fell over me, and I couldn't get my legs out of the way. So that actually put me out for a long time because, and I was doing physical therapy at the time, so I knew what I was looking at. And they basically said, okay, we can fuse your neck, which at the time they believed in you'll never do jiu-jitsu again, or you can stop and we can try let it heal. So, for about a year, I was basically like a dog left out in the cold looking in at all these guys on the mat going, oh, wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. So, but yeah, that kind of started my neck issues. So every time we tell stories about him, my neck is like, yeah, remember that guy? Yep. He did this to us.
Yeah, you're not the only one with that kind of story. When he passed away, you remember Jeff Pearson?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff was in Phoenix at that time. He was one of my first jiu-jitsu students. He was a UNO student, graduated, went out to...
Is he a black belt now?
He stopped at Brown and started doing Ironmans.
Ah, okay.
Which also cracks me up. He's works for a company that deals with hospitals, and he travels a lot. And at one point, the hospitals in Omaha was part of his territory. Now he's training for an Ironman. So I'm talking to him on the phone, and it's like 8 o'clock at night, and he's like, Scott, I got to go. I got to get 50 miles in on the bike yet tonight. I'm like, what? Like, I couldn't even drive 50 miles yet tonight. So, an Ironman is what? You swim like 2 or 4 miles, ride 110 or 120 on a bike, and then run a full marathon.
Yep.
So he's getting ready for the real Ironman in Kona, Hawaii. And he calls me up and says, Scott, I'm going to be in Omaha. You want to go get something to eat? And I'm like, bring your gi, man. We'll roll. He goes, I'm in no shape to do jiu-jitsu. I'm like, what?
I'm getting ready for the Ironman. I can't do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
And I gave him that hard time. But he's another guy. When I called him and told him about RJ, I was like, man, terrible news. RJ passed away. He said, oh, my God, I can't believe it. What happened? He said, I'm going to think about him with every step I take the rest of my life. I was like, man, that's nice of you to say. I appreciate that. He said, no, that fucker hurt my hip so bad.
Yeah, so he left his mark on a lot of us in more ways than he probably planned.
So you kind of started out training with Rickson, and then I'm not sure if you transitioned to training with Fabio. How did you end up to train with Fabio Santos? How did that come about?
All right, well, and Mick was with me in the first jiu-jitsu tournament I fought in. I fought in judo tournaments because that's all there was, but Rickson set up a nice, great tournament. His first tournament, when was that, 97, 96? Yeah. Somewhere in there. Mick was out there with me, and
Kevin Newman.
Yep, Kevin Newman, Greg James. Yeah. Who else? Isaac Riggs, who's a black belt in Chicago now. But anyway, Fabio reffed my first fight. So that's when I met Fabio. Okay. And then kept in touch a little bit. I mean, I knew who he was. One of Rickson's black belts, just like Pedro Sauer, Megaton,
Lamone.
Yeah, Lamone, a number of other people. But the big thing why I stopped training with Rickson was when Hodgson passed away.
Hodgson was Rickson's son.
Yep,
And kind of
son.
the heir to the throne almost.
Yep.
Everybody was looking at this kid as being like the next man.
Yeah, and he was. I mean, we trained a lot with him. We were getting privates with him when he was a purple belt. I mean, he was a small guy, maybe 130 pounds. I mean, he was a little guy. And would just kill us. You know, It was amazing. And he passed away in December of 2000. I arguably so, Rickson, was devastated. I mean, his oldest son is dead. And he went back to Brazil. And we had a trip set in early 2008 that the way it all appeared, we were going to Rickson's to get our purple belts in 2001. Hodgson died in December of 2000.
Okay.
Well, that trip got canceled. Rickson's just gone, and I waited. I even was still at tournaments and stuff, and I gave notes to people that I knew would see or talk to Rickson with my phone number and stuff. And even Fabio, nobody talked to him. Matter of fact, the first time some people even knew he was alive was when they saw him in the Hulk movie.
Yeah.
And he was just hanging out in Brazil, trying to get his head straight, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And surfing, and I heard he was training at places, but it was all kind of hush. So my loyalty to Rickson really cost me a lot of rank. I never stopped training. I still trained. I went to other people's seminars and stuff. But definitely, who knows when I would have got my black belt. But I really
it delayed the inevitable.
It definitely delayed it. And I even had other guys give me belts, and I was like, I appreciate it and everything, but you're really not my instructor. And so nothing against those guys. I appreciated it. So, it was like 5 years, and I'm like, I need to do something.
Yeah.
At that time, after 5 years, it's like, it doesn't look like Rickson's coming back.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed. So I was actually signed up, getting ready to head to West Virginia to train with Pedro Sauer. That was who I was going to go with.
Okay.
And really, at the time, Pedro was always in Salt Lake City, I believe it was. So, that's still heading west. And I got his membership card. I talked to him, talked about rank and, Rickson and everything. So he knew the whole background. And I was like, man, why am I heading to the East Coast to do pursuing jiu-jitsu right now? Even back then, which would have been 2006, you didn't have to go to Rio anymore. That San Diego, LA corridor is, and still is, the
mecca of jiu-jitsu.
the jiu-jitsu hub. So I called Fabio and went through everything, and it didn't dawn on me, but Fabio felt a lot like I did, that, and not that Rickson did anything to us. I have two kids I love very much, Victoria and Nate, and I can't imagine if something ever happened to them. I would never be the same again, the same person. But, not so much abandoned, but, our instructor's gone. What do we do? Kind of lost, I guess, would be a better term. And I didn't talk to Pedro about any of that stuff, but Fabio and I definitely made a connection about that. Because he was saying things, exact words that I thought, So, and that was fun. And another thing is I stopped competing. So I think it was about 2006. I weighed 240 pounds. So when I was ready to go to the next size bigger pants, that also had to do a little bit with, I think it's about time to get back, not just being an instructor, but get back into competing and get back to where I was, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
With everything, with an instructor, with structure, with goals, with competition. And I set a goal to compete. I think it was in the Pan Ams of 07 maybe at 205. Holy smokes, I barely made it.
Oh, man.
Now I walk around like 188.
Yeah, that's
kinda
hard
crazy.
to picture.
Yeah, I think I pretty much burnt every picture from then. So hopefully nobody will have to picture that. So anyway, that's kind of and then the first time, and I love this because the first time I went out to Fabio's, I rolled with all of his guys, got my blue belt with like 4 stripes. First class, I roll with all his guys. Fabio stands there and he goes, "Take that fucking blue belt off." And I was like, yeah, thank God. I've been wearing this thing for like 7 years.
So how was Fabio, like the first time you met him, first time you went out to his place, did he still have the same kind of vibe that at the old, the Pico gym or the
exactly.
Palisades?
Yeah,
Was it the same kind of environment?
Yeah, that's another thing I loved about it was all that stuff is ingrained, and all the things I love and still love about Rickson, but at that time missed, just took right over with Fabio, and keeping it legit and keeping it real and thinking about what Elio wanted, in the belt ranks and stuff. And I remember Rickson even telling us, he was like, man, when the Koreans first landed here in the U.S., they were badasses. But, they had to change things and it had to evolve and it had to get watered down a little bit, or a lot actually, with Taekwondo. But, to make it family friendly and a money making business. He said the same thing will happen to Jiu Jitsu. And, Fabio's always butting heads with like the IBJJF. Mm-hmm. They added all these belts and everything, and that's just to keep American parents happy.
Yeah.
No other reason. Even like now, kids walk in and they were just at and I teach Taekwondo. I'm a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. I still teach it. It's just a whole nother animal.
Yeah.
And that's just how Taekwondo is. But I like how Jiu Jitsu is, that kids can't even be a black belt. Mm-hmm. Kids have a total separate ranking system. But Mick probably knows too, when you get the parents that come in and say, well, how long will it take to get a black belt? Well, your kid's 9, they can't even think about it till they're 17 and go to the adult ranks. So you're looking, 9 to 17 is,
Not even just the kids though, like adults too. People they'll ask me like, what about you? You've been in martial arts your whole life. How long did it take you to be a black belt? I'm like, 20 years?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I don't have that kind of time. I'm like, well, what's stopping you? Like, what's in the way?
And we see it, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but we see it every time we have a seminar and give out rank.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen it, Josh.
Oh, yeah. You're high enough now to
how many people you see piss and moan and quit?
Right. Yeah, it never makes sense to me. I remember way back when I first started, I didn't even really know Mick at the time, but I kind of caught him after class and I said, you know what? Because I had no idea what was going on. I said, what do I need to do to get my blue belt? And then he just said, keep doing what you're doing. I was like, okay. And I just kept doing what I'm doing. And that's how I ended up here. But yeah, people come in with expectations and kids, their parents, adults, training. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. That's not why I train. I've said it 100 times. Like if you told me I'd never get promoted again, then I'll just keep training. I mean, you keep training, eventually you'll.
Hey, you're not getting promoted again.
So
no, there was the saying that you say the easiest way to make a person disappear in jiu-jitsu is give them a blue belt.
Yeah, man, I feel like David Copperfield.
Yeah. Well, the blue belt makes sense. I could see someone coming in and working really hard for a while and getting that blue belt accomplishment and feeling good. The thing that really mystifies me is when people come in and they get to purple or they get to brown and then they leave. Like, you had to work so hard to get there. Why not just stick it out for a couple more years,
And what I usually see, what usually happens is they go seek someone that will give it to them quicker.
Yeah.
No matter what they say.
Yeah.
I've seen egos dented, but I've also just heard ridiculous things. I really thought I was going to get my blue belt today. It's like, well, when was the last time you trained with me? Well, I think it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you think it might be a little tough for me to, to promote you and, give you something positive for not training for 2 years?
Yeah.
But I swim 4 miles every day. I'm like, well, then go talk to your swimming instructor. Maybe they'll give you a blue belt.
I got a blue belt in swimming. No, it's a different mentality. And I think it's hard for people to think about doing something that long, anything.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's why you see a lot of people quit after blue belt because, man, that's a major chunk of time and it's a major goal. It's anywhere 2 to 4 years. That's about what it takes to get a black belt in Taekwondo and a lot of other disciplines. So it's kind of that same time frame that, man, I worked so hard and I got this and okay, maybe it's time, to look at something else.
Yeah. Well, and when I think about it, I think about the process. It's almost like reading a book, right? If you pick up Lord of the Rings and you look at this 1,200, 1,500 page book and you think every single page, you're like, man, I got 1,499 more pages to go. Man, I've got 1,497 more pages to go. Like, if you do that through the whole book, you're never going to finish it. But if you can actually enjoy what's on every single page, eventually you'll make your way through the book. And I mean, jiu-jitsu is no different, right? Every day is going to be a new experience. Even if you're doing something very similar, every time you train, it's never, absolutely the same.
Your partner's always going to give you something that you didn't maybe see yesterday or the day before. I mean, like yesterday, so Scott and I, we train together every week. We have for years. And, yesterday it's kind of like you're getting lungs back and my shoulder's feeling good. And like we roll like really hard, good, technical.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
But like in the middle of it, we're in these like 50-50 positions and we're like doing play-by-plays and talking about, I know you could catch you right here. Like, I know you could do this. And like, that's the cool part about jiu-jitsu is that there's always that chess game going on. I don't care if you're a beginner or black belts. The black belts are just more aware that it's a chess game.
Yep.
Yeah.
The white belt, he's just swimming around, just trying not to drown and doesn't even realize he's a piece on the board, But it's tough to try convince a white belt to stick it out because they walk into a gym and they see other white belts and they're like, hey, you're a white belt too. How long have you been training? 4 years. And I'm like, I got fucking nothing in common with that guy other than we're both white belts. Like, what the hell? How's that even fair?
Yeah.
It is. It's tough.
Then I get the guys too that don't want rank. Oh, rank doesn't mean anything to me. I was like, so you want to be a black belt for like 10 years? I mean, I go to put a stripe on their belt and they're like, I don't need that. I'm like, well, everybody else needs it.
Yeah.
It's not fair to the new guy coming in thinking just like what you just said. Holy smokes, me and that guy that just beat my ass are the same exact rank. Did he start like yesterday?
Yeah.
That must have been an awesome class.
It's different. And I always feel that the people who say belts aren't important are usually the ones with them.
Yeah.
My mindset probably changed when I got my black belt. Like, I'd still be doing it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice
to
have it,
yeah.
to have that, like, hey, you know what? I earned this. I've been doing this for years. And, and I think like your and I's relationship is kind of unique in the sport, unfortunately, where you have someone that you've been training with together for such a long time in this,
close to 25 years.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I definitely want that black belt. I got it in my crosshairs, but I'm not concerned about how long it's going to take. Yeah. I just want to
keep doing what you're doing.
Just keep doing what you're doing. And I don't think, I think guys like the three of us, and, we could list a whole list of names in Omaha and the area. I just don't think people have that mentality of really being fighters, their whole lives. I mean, in a few weeks, I'm going to be 56 years old. And the older I get, the more attributes I lose, like everybody's stronger than me, more explosive, more endurance, more everything. But luckily, my main attribute that not a whole lot of people have is the knowledge of jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And man, that's a huge equalizer. At 56 years old, you go with a 28-year-old guy that, if you looked at pictures next to each other, you'd be buying life insurance on me. But all I can say is thank God for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Technique is king. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything. We've got a couple other features we'll cover. I was going to ask, where can people find you online?
Well, my school is Woodbine Martial Arts, and that's a little bitty town in Iowa. Woodbine with a B. Okay. Probably the Facebook page, I try and put something out daily.
Okay.
Also have a website, but it doesn't get updated very often, but you can still check that out. And then Mix, Facebook stuff. I teach at Mix, at Tactical 88, at Elite Academy of Martial Arts, at FFC in Grand Island, Eddie's School. I think that's it.
Okay.
Just for the record, everybody knows Scott is my jiu-jitsu instructor. So I am always conscious of the fact that my lineage to the source is short.
Yep.
You have Rickson, Fabio, Scott.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't really get much closer. I mean, a lot of times you come across people and they're like, "Oh, I do jiu-jitsu. Oh, who's your instructor?" Yeah, tell them on who's he a black belt under. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's like 12 people or 15 people away. I think that's one thing we're very fortunate about, is that our lineage to the source is very narrow, and so I think we've been lucky to not become diluted with a bunch of other people's ideas.
Yep, I agree.
And we're lucky that way.
Yeah, and I'm super proud to train under Fabio. Like, I'm kind of a rebel, so I like the guys that aren't afraid to say what they think. And he, like you said
he's
before,
not afraid to say what he thinks.
Oh no,
and
to anybody.
Yeah, and it still kind of blows my mind that I don't get to see him that often, but I still get to see him. It just, I don't think a lot of people understand how big a deal that is. We've talked about it before. Like, if you wanted to go, if you're a basketball player and you wanted to go train with LeBron, like, that's not going to happen. It's just maybe if you pay tens of thousands of dollars, and yet, basically Fabio is LeBron of jiu-jitsu, and I get to train with him a couple times a year.
Yeah, and I get that all the time. I'll be walking through an airport or somewhere with, all I wear is jiu-jitsu t-shirts. And somebody's like, "Oh, you do jiu-jitsu? Who you train under?" That same type of thing. Well, Rickson and Fabio Santos. And I always get that look like,
Really?
and let me guess, you take basketball lessons with Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And
If
I'm
he
like,
did
whatever.
jiu-jitsu, I'd probably be able to.
Yeah.
So now you just, before we kind of wrap this up though, just to kind of bring everybody up to date, now that Rickson is back and teaching again and living in California, you have since reconnected.
Yes.
And
which is crazy. I mean, we text each other about once a week, and I talked to him on the phone, and I think it was last summer, was out at his house. I've been to his classes at Crohn's and
we just talked a couple of weeks ago because Crone just made the announcement that he's going to do MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott and I are talking. I was like, man, be awesome if Crone wants some Muay Thai. And he's like, well, let me ask Rickson. And so Rickson's like, well, here, just talk to Crone. And he gives Scott Crone's number. And I was like, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
This guy has the phone numbers, and, so it is. It's
I
cool.
laughed when Rickson said, just call Crone, and gave me his cell number.
And I remember one of the last times you went and trained with him, he came back with a video of Rickson saying, hey, Scott, I might have to borrow that video for you and put it on YouTube so people can see it, if you're okay with that.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, that cracked me up too, because when I first asked him to do that, I was like, hey, Rickson, I'm getting ready to head out. Could you give me like some kind of blurb or something? Because I get that, I'm like, so I'm going to tell people I hung out and rolled with Rickson in his front room for 3 hours. I mean, we got pictures and stuff. So anyway, I said, can you, do something? So at first he was like, nah, I better not. I was like, that's cool. He was like, turn your phone on. Let's do something. And so, yeah, he did like a 20-second, little, my friend Scott's here. He's been kicking my ass for so long. I'm like, oh, it's shit.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. Well, appreciate you coming on. We'll go ahead, kind of transition to our closing here. So, as always, you can check us out at thegentlemanbadass.com. We'll have show notes for this show. We'll have video for this show if you'd like to see what Scott looks like, what any of us look like. We'll have that on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the podcast. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube and like this video. It really helps us out quite a bit. Helps us spread the word. So if you like what we're doing, tell your friends about it. Have them come down, download, and check us out. So we're going to start with the book of the week. Mick's actually going to cover the book of the week. Book that I read, I really like, and I'll have Mick tell you about that.
Yeah, this is actually one that I use the Audible app a lot, and just kind of as I'm working on my desk or in the car. It's an easy way for me to get through a bunch of books. And this is one that I just finished. Actually didn't even know that you'd read it when we were just talking about it. The book is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. Most people probably don't really know who he is until, and I didn't know either. I just had heard about the book, but he's been a bunch of things, from a journalist, school teacher, tractor trailer driver, bartender.
He was a Marine.
Worked in a mental hospital. He was a fruit picker, and a many-time failed screenwriter until he wrote the book The Legend of Bag of Ants. The book, The War of Art, is basically about the struggle that artists have trying to do their art. Biggest thing being procrastination, or as he kind of eloquently puts it, resistance. He talks about resistance all the time. A great book that has just a ton of lessons for anybody who's been putting something off. I think as an artist, whether it's music, whether it's training, the entrepreneurial side, it's easy to stack up excuses why you shouldn't tackle things, or maybe just put them off till tomorrow. There's some great lessons in the book. A couple of things that I personally learned is that you're not alone, that most creative people are that way. It's okay. It's just kind of goes along with the territory. Second thing is that you have to treat your art or whatever it is like a full-time job. You gotta make goals for yourself, and then make time for it. And then when you do commit to something that you enjoy, that you can actually change the world. It can have a profound effect on you and people around you. There's a lot of great gems in the book. Probably my favorite quote. I better read it here so I don't screw it up. The most important thing about art is to work. Nothing else matters except sitting down every day and trying. But really enjoyed it. If you do the audiobook version, audible version, it's actually a quick listen to. When I heard about the book, the review that I read about it, the guy said that he read it in one sitting, sitting in a park bench in Central Park, and he just kind of flew through it. So The War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, if you have ever procrastinated ever in your life, pick this book up. It's got some great lessons to kind of give you the little shove that you need.
Yeah, after reading that book, I made a couple changes, and that was probably 2-3 years ago. I think 2017 was when I made it a point to start practicing guitar for at least 20 minutes every day. Now I've played guitar for more than half my life, 25 years or something like that. But I got to the point where you get good enough, and you think, I don't really need to practice, or how much better can I really get? When I made that change, when I started practicing for 20 minutes, I set the bar low, right? 20 minutes is easy to do. Even if I'm busy, I can find 20 minutes. And when I say every day, I mean every day. I actually missed June 17th in 2017, and it drove me crazy that I didn't have a perfect record. But I remember one point, like it was 11 o'clock at night, and I was in bed, and I realized, crap, I haven't practiced. So I got up, and I worked scales for 20 minutes, and it completely transformed my guitar playing. Same with writing. Before I had read his book, I'd never actually finished a book that I've written. And I made it a point to start writing at least 500 words. I don't do every single morning, but generally every weekday morning I write 500 words. And since then I've written two kids' books, and I've got a couple other books I'm working on that I'll finish.
Yeah, Pressfield, the book actually inspired me to. I had been using the free version of Headspace, the kind of meditation app, just sparingly, and I always got like something good out of just taking a little bit of quiet time and meditating. And this book actually prompted me to kind of make a plan to meditate, and have since upgraded to the paid version of Headspace. So any of the Headspace people, if you're out there, you're doing a great job. I'm hoping by using your app, I will reverse years of brain damage from fighting. But yeah, Pressfield inspired me to do that too. It's these little changes like that where you can make a massive difference about your discipline and get stuff done.
Awesome. Yeah, great book. Highly recommended. We'll put that on the bookshelf on the website. Then also we've got the workout of the week. So for the workout of the week, I've actually been trying to get myself ready for the Murph Challenge. For those who don't know, the Murph Challenge is, I believe, is kind of like a CrossFit style workout for was it Michael Murphy?
Yep.
Michael Murphy, Navy SEAL, who was killed in Operation Red Wing. So the workout itself is, this is not the workout of the week. It's what I'm training for, but it's you put on a 20-pound vest, and then you run for a mile, do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 body weight squats, and then you run another mile, and you're doing that for time. So for the most part, I'm not too intimidated. 100 pull-ups, though, with a weighted vest sounds pretty tough. And so the workout that I've been doing here to try to get ready for that is kind of based around that. So what you're going to do for the workout of the week is you're going to put on a 20-pound weight vest, and you're going to start out with pull-ups to failure. So you're going to do a set of pull-ups to failure, then you're going to get on the Roman chair, and you're going to do straight-legged leg raises, 12. And for those, you want the negative, and actually for all of the exercises, you want your negative to be slow. So if I'm doing a pull-up to max, I'm going to do a pull-up, and I'm going to slowly lower myself down, probably 3 to 4 seconds on the negative, and then back up, and then slowly on the way down. Same with the leg raises. You're going to do 12 of those with a slow negative, and then also 12 push-ups with a slow negative. Once you're done with that, you're going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and you're going to do 2 minutes on the speed bag. And actually, this is kind of fun because I have avoided the speed bag like a plague, because you get on that thing and it's like, what, and you sound stupid. You sound like an idiot if you don't do it well. And so finally, one of my goals for this year was like, I'm finally going to do that. I'm going to stop being afraid of the speed bag. And so I started doing that regularly. I think I've done it maybe 5 days now, and I'm so much better than when I started. And it's actually a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to getting better at that. So once again, so it's those 4 exercises, and you're going to do that 5 times in a row. So pull-ups to failure, 12 straight-legged leg raises on the Roman chair, 12 push-ups, and then 2 minutes on the speed bag 5 times for 5 times around for time. And I tell you what, probably that 3rd, 4th, 5th round when you're hitting that speed bag, like you can hardly hold your arms up. Yeah, this workout's made me sore like I haven't been in a while.
That's the one you were doing the other day?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. So check that out. We'll put that on the show notes as well as, probably just the show notes for that. But the book will be on the bookshelf. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast. We've got our mailing list on the website and merch. We've got hats and mindset journals, and we're going to be adding more to that as time comes along. So Mick's holding up that mindset journal right there.
With my notes and my goals even. The very first page I started off this year with some of my goals.
You
can see them. They're my goals.
I keep most of my goals secret. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sure we can absolutely do a round 2. We could talk jiu-jitsu for days, I'm sure. So I'm sure we'll get you back on.
According to my wife, I can.
Yeah, all of our wives are very understanding for our
jiu-jitsu widows.
With this sport,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. It cracks me up. I don't mean to interrupt you, but my wife always introduced me. This is my husband, Scott. Please don't bring up martial arts.
Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.